Hi, welcome to Matters of the Heart and Soul. I'm your host, Janie Charlo. Matters of the Heart and Soul is a podcast to raise awareness and awaken humanity to all that is within. We want to be a beacon of light on your life journey.
Hi, welcome to Matters of the Heart and Soul podcast. I am your host, Janie Charlo, and I have my co-host, Russell Bruce.
Hey, Janie.
All right, and today we are actually talking with Miss Kina Reed, and Kina was actually on the podcast not long ago, and I wanted to have her back specifically for this conversation. We are about to talk about shifting the atmosphere from fear to love. Kina is a communication practitioner. She's the director of forensics and teaches in the Department of Communication Studies at LSU Baton Rouge. So welcome back, Kina.
I'm glad to be here. Glad to be a part of the membership tonight.
Yes. So we are here live in Atlanta. Coronavirus is here in Atlanta, Georgia. Our schools are shut down for 2 weeks. My son's school personally is affected. So, we're going to ride that wave. So we thought that now is the perfect opportunity for everyone to know what we should be doing during this time. So we're going to talk a little bit about, first of all, I believe that social media and technology, internet, is going to be our main source of communication because our schools are shut down, our jobs are shut down, church is shut down, the grocery stores are emptying out. So how can we use social media, Kina, in a positive way during this time?
Well, I think, my first reaction to that is paying attention to whose feeds, whose pages you're absorbing information from. Even when we think about like the information we currently have about this, CV-19, and there's a tendency, I think, for people to be media illiterate, if that makes sense, like not knowing how to critically use media, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for example, like a thoughtful person recognizes that if I'm going to get information about this disease, I should be getting it from like credible sources like the CDC or the World Health Organization, as opposed to going to my Aunt Susie May's Facebook page. You get what I'm saying? So I would kind of I would translate that to paying attention to whose feeds are you feeding from, no pun intended, but like, because I do agree that the way that we're going to be communicating, especially if there's high levels of people quarantining, will be through these channels. And so people should be mindful of who they're accessing and for what reasons.
Great point.
So what are like some things we should be posting? Like, I personally think that we are in a state of fear for the most part. So I feel like if we're going to shift the atmosphere from fear to love, then we should be posting techniques or books or, anything that can help shift your vibration and keep it in love versus fear. Versus posting fear-based things.
So I think we need to position ourselves in two places. One is about affirming where people are, and part of that is going to be compassion and consideration. Because, like, I have a friend right now who today, her Facebook post almost had me in tears. She is someone who has an ongoing health issue. She's autoimmune deficient. That's her reality. And she was talking about her very real fears centering around what this potential disease may bring to her family, and the impacts. And I certainly don't want to be the type of person who's going to be like, girl, there's nothing to fear but fear itself, right? So there has to be a place for compassion. There has to be a place for consideration and recognizing. And like, how do we make space for people? Yes, like even when we think about it from a spiritual standpoint, um, there's some things that exist in the Bible in both New and Old Testament. Not that I'm trying to be like a preacher right now, but one of those things is like lament, right? And lament is a collective grief. So how do we sit with people who have very real anxieties and fears? You get what I'm saying? Like that is a very real thing.
Right.
And so how do we position that, but at the same time offer affirmation too, right? Because we would be amiss to leave it at that. We would be amiss to just say, oh Lord, everything's going to be going bad for you. I'm going to pray for you. But how do we also lift other people up and say, hey, this is a very real thing you're going through. I want to sit in this with you. I want to agree with you where it's appropriate. I want to weep with you if that's what you need. But at the same time, I want to affirm you too. So I think those are going to be the two places we have to consistently be kind of positioning and posturing ourselves towards: a willingness to be compassionate, to listen, to make space for people, but at the same time, trying to also offer support and resourcing, right? Like, how can I be of service?
Exactly.
I think both of those are going to be really powerful places to be. And neither of those are places that add panic upon panic. You get what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Because there are going to be people who, you remember like junior high school, and there would be two kids who wanted to fight, but they really didn't want to fight, right? And so there would be that kid who put their hands in the middle of the fighting kids and be like, which one touches your hand? Or your mama said what?
Yeah.
The instigators,
Exactly.
you get what I'm saying? So the two kids, they didn't want to fight because like y'all have been in the same circle for 10 minutes. None of y'all want to do this. But because of the instigation from onlookers, it aggravate a situation. So that's definitely where we don't need to be. We don't need to be aggravating. We don't have to be instigating. We don't have to tell people there's no toilet paper for miles and miles and miles away. That's unnecessary commentary. That's what we need to be avoiding, right?
Those are great points, Kina. And I think you said, how can I be of service? And service is action.
Yes, for sure.
And I think everyone can, in some capacity, be of service. Whether it is if you have some extra food in your house and somebody else ran out, hey, I have some extra such and such, you can come over and get it this time.
Yeah.
If there's no time,
so
hey, I have an extra roll.
An educator, like I was just thinking, like for example, I just was invited to a Facebook group today. So I teach at LSU. We just got the official word from our higher ups that we're going completely online starting March 30th. And so classes for the next 2 weeks are canceled. Mm-hmm. And what they're doing is they're extending spring break for students and giving us faculty time to figure out how to put our face-to-face classes online.
Right.
And the Facebook group I joined, ironically, is called Pandemic Pedagogy. And it's educators across the country who are in this Facebook group, and we're going to help each other and coach each other figure out how to teach online. Because for so many of us, that's not a thing. That's not our reality. So that's the type of resourcing we can provide for people like, hey, I have a skill set that might help you in this challenging time.
Yeah.
So that's just an example of that kind of resourcing we can do, because as an educator, I'm a little overwhelmed. I mean, I'm like, I don't know how to teach online. I've never really had to do it. To be in this group and learn from people who are more familiar, more comfortable, is going to be a tremendous resource. And I just use that as an example because there could be people who are in the medical field who can say, hey, we can resource people in this way, provide this type of support, this type of education, this type of information. So I think that's something we all can do to serve people around us.
Absolutely.
At this time.
Hey, Kina, I have a daughter who's a junior at the University of West Georgia currently, and they've just been informed starting next week that, for 2 weeks at least, they're going to be taking classes online. Are they providing you all with a special type of software, or are you just having a
So,
type of
well, so
yeah.
that's where these things kind of have layers, right? Every institution, every different school system, because Louisiana State University is part of Louisiana State system, right? So they have their own resources. Um, the you know, so that's going to be contingent upon that university and what system that university is a part of. So like for us, we're in Louisiana, and dot dot dot. We're not necessarily the school. We're not necessarily a state that has budgets that are enormous. So in this regard, uh, we have what we have on campus already. I don't foresee our university providing extreme measures in terms of getting us additional supports. But I know that some schools and some institutions already have like really great like technological plans in place already. So I think it's just depending on, again, the school, the system that your school is a part of, and then the budget that already exists.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not going to be uniform across like it's not going to be a uniform experience, because even depending on that state school, if it is a state school, there might be institutions that are part of that get more resource than others, just depending on where is it located and that institution's budget.
Okay, that's good stuff there.
And yeah, and I will also add this, like I said, I'm a part of this group, and I don't want to make this about education, but one of the things that I'm going to be going into I'm making this like I'm transferring what was a face-to-face discussion-based class into an
Mm-hmm.
online experience. And one of the things that we as educators are going to have to think about is we're going to have to think about what are the students going to be experiencing when they come home, because they didn't expect this either, right? Like, especially those state schools that have students from all over the country and all over the world. So, what can I do that won't lend itself to students having or experiencing stress around
Mm.
this, you know,
Well, that
because this is unexpected for them as
yeah, and
well.
that kind of goes into my next question of we have all this time at home um, where you can quiet yourself. So, what would it be like?
But Janie, you're assuming that,
No, 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 no. I'm
right?
saying where because everything's a choice, correct? So,
For sure.
so
Because
choice. So, what I'm saying,
for some people, that won't be what they're experiencing. You get what I'm saying?
Right, but
I
that
agree, but there's a choice. Like you can choose. So you can say, I'm going to run around frantic, or I can choose to quiet myself during these two. Let's just
Yeah.
say the whole US is down 2 weeks, right?
Yes.
And in these 2 weeks, we are at home. Now, I'm saying, what if, because I truly believe in the concept that what we feed grows. But what if of 24 to 48 hours, we went silent? No one fed the coronavirus media. What would it look like on day 3 at 72 hours?
Gosh, I can't personally process that. And the reason why I can't process that is because I have been reading, and I haven't been reading the hyped up we're all gonna die, right? Like, for
You
example,
said
some of
you have or
the stuff
have,
I've been reading
you said
today,
you,
I have
okay.
not. I've been reading. I have been reading today, but what I'm saying is I've not been reading like the hyped up stories about like no toilet
Right.
paper. I'm really concerned about, like, for example, like what does it mean for those kids K through 12 who are in situations where their school closing down isn't as simple as their school closing down, but like that's where they get their most substantial meals of the
Well,
day.
that's okay.
Like that.
And that's what I'm saying. And that's where the fear goes in. So if we're concerned about these kids and we have ample supply in our own pantry, then none of these kids should have a concern. And if we're going to be of service. So all I'm saying is and I'm not saying we're quiet. I'm saying we're quiet in a way we're not feeding the hype of the media. We're quiet. We're not quiet in service and helping and making sure everyone meets their needs.
Yeah. No, that's powerful. You know what I'm saying? That's extremely powerful.
Because, so,
because that's a very real reality. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, for parents, like I said, I've been reading today, and there are parents who are really concerned about, like, what is that going to mean for their household grocery budget? Because school provides, in some ways, childcare, right? That's one thing school provides, K through 12. Free childcare in some capacities if your kid goes to public school.
Steps up and serves.
Yeah.
So I think that's a powerful piece of it, to think about it like that, for sure.
Let me interject here. So this goes back to like in the 70s, for example. Like I grew up in the projects. Janie and I have had this conversation before. It's like we could actually leave our doors open and people didn't try to rob you or anything, because in our neighborhood we bartered. Like if I had milk and Miss Mary had sugar and somebody bread, you could actually put a meal together so nobody starved, everybody ate. And you could leave it open because no one was starving. Like today we don't know our neighbors. So the whole thing is, like, we're talking about shifting the atmosphere, right? From fear to love. And a lot of the fear is because people feel separated and
disconnected.
Right. They feel disconnected. Whereas, so like what you're saying are definite real concerns, but it's like, how hard would it be for those who have to help these families out? And those conversations aren't what's being had on social media. Instead, people are just reposting what they see on CNN. We're caught up in the fear that we're not being proactive and coming up with viable solutions to help feed these people. And it could be pretty simple, because
powerful.
Think about it. I remember back when the earthquakes in Haiti had taken place and everyone was rallying together to send food. It's like it costs nothing to get beans and rice. Like I myself, I know I could get enough beans and rice to eat for a whole year and that'd be cool. So it's we have to come up with another conversation other than just regurgitating the obvious. We know that there's a disease out there. We know what its potential is, but it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing to help ourselves and others, right?
And others.
So worst case scenario, if we know it's getting ready to take out 50% of the population, what are we spiritually doing to prepare ourselves? You know what I mean? Like, and I think in most people, regardless of what their religious or spiritual philosophy is, if they are spending time really digging into that on a daily basis, fear should be at a minimum.
For sure. I think, kind of going back to what I was saying about, what does lament mean? And that's to sit in someone's grief. It is also to sit in stillness with someone and to have empathy. And I think there are so many things that on a day-to-day basis distract us from doing that, distract us from fully seeing each other, right? Like, so what does it mean to fully see my neighbor, to fully see them, their humanity? And I think, I definitely don't say this lightly, but sometimes experiencing a certain amount of pressure can remind you of what really counts, right? And so I think some of that stillness, that silence, that observation of empathy may come as a result of knowing that there are people who are experiencing suffering that are close to me and forcing me to rethink compassion, you know, because I don't think on a daily basis we see ourselves as someone who has the power to directly impact others. There are so many things that keep us from seeing ourselves like that,
And the
you know.
truth is, we're all one. So it's almost when you see somebody
Yeah.
suffering, you're watching yourself suffer. And
Yeah.
we have the power to shift the atmosphere. We just have to know that and step into that power. But I was also thinking about thoughts or things, right? And let's talk about scarcity versus abundance. So if
Yeah.
fear is scarcity, so
Yes,
it,
it totally is. It's
it's
saying
not
there's not
enough. We
enough.
don't have
There's
enough.
not
My
enough.
kids won't have enough. You know,
It's the reason why people are going into Costco and buying 6 months worth of toilet paper. Come on, are
because
you
that
serious?
scarcity mindset, and that's a fear based, and it's saying I gotta get mine. I don't know about you, but I gotta get mine.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
when we have to
Exactly.
come into a oneness, which is love, and take care of each other during this
Yeah.
time.
And it also goes back to what, our people, people perish because of a lack of knowledge. If anyone knows how capitalism works, right? Like that's what I was having this conversation with my sister earlier. If anyone knows how capitalism works, you better believe that Charmin and Scott and Procter and Gamble, they're gonna make toilet paper till they can't make toilet paper anymore. So this idea that these companies are all of a sudden just gonna stop making toilet paper, like that's not even how capitalism works. So I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, do people not know like how the free market is engaged in this? Like no one's gonna stop making these
No, they
essential
don't.
things, you know,
Lack of knowledge.
you know, and so that lack of knowledge is also driving
Yeah.
fear as well. You know what I'm saying? Because people don't know how things work.
Yeah, there are going to be some companies that, even though the stock market's taken a major hit as a result of the virus on an international level, some some of these companies are going
Yeah,
to come out looking pretty good.
Lysol, Clorox. I
Pharrell,
mean, y- Purell is like we're in the money, right? I heard somebody say they were talking about the cost of Pharrell. I was like, oh my goodness, like gracious Lord, So yeah, they're not about to stop production
yeah,
anytime
and a lot of
soon.
people are panicking because they're losing a lot of money in their 401k and in the stock market, things of that nature. I think it's a good time also for those who are in finance or in the stock market to be online posting things, telling people how this is actually an opportunity financially. If they're sitting on some cash when it bottoms out, to go ahead and start purchasing, and they can recoup their money on the way back. Because a lot of people that understand
Yeah,
how it works, they make money whether it's up or down. And I think historically, most of us really only make money when we ride the wave on the way up. But this is really an opportunity on so many
yeah,
different levels, like financially, spiritually, everything. Because everybody out there has some type of religious or spiritual like philosophy that they live their life by. This is a good time to put it to practice. It's like Mike Tyson
for
said, he
sure.
said everybody has a plan when they step into the ring until they get punched in the nose, then their plan goes out the window. So this is almost like a spiritual punch in the nose to humanity. And it's like, do we panic, or do we implement those things practice on Saturday and Sunday?
Like what happens when you have to walk out something that you've never had to walk out before? What happens when you have to um walk in faith in real recognizable ways that you never had to do? And I think about, what does it mean? Like no one is truly empty if they have community, right? You know
Exactly.
what I'm saying? Like if you are in community, if you are living in community, you are never truly empty. But again, it goes back to what are the things that people tell themselves they need to be sustained that aren't really true. You get what I'm saying? Like Trevor Noah of the Daily Show, who I
He's
just think
very
is so great, he's so spot on. He said, "This is how you know America's a first world country." He's like, growing up, sometimes we didn't have toilet paper. It was okay, you know. And of course, he's laughing, right? He grew up in South Africa, but he's like, it's okay. You have a paper towel, like. And so a part of this is also like I guess what you call it, the arrogance or the privilege of living in a society where most of us have never really gone without certain things. And this is our reaction, like, oh my gosh, like, what? I'm not gonna have Charmin? Oh my goodness, you know?
That's
like
a good point.
like a lot of the world does not even have access to clean drinking water on a daily basis. So I think we're gonna have to develop some perspective here.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
I want to read something to you guys here. I post this every now and then. I'm not sure if people actually get it. It says, "We the willing, led by the unknowing, are doing the impossible for the ungrateful. We have done so much with so little for so long. We are now qualified to do anything with nothing." So
that's deep.
So that goes back to what you were saying. So it's like our people in particular, it's like when this country is in a recession, we've been in a recession. We were already in a recession, you know.
Who you telling?
It's
Say
like
that again.
when the country may go into a recession periodically every so many years or whatever, but it's like we've always been in a recession, so it's not new to us, right? And the thing is, it's like we are at the lowest level of a real live monopoly game. You know, like post-slavery,
Yes.
it's like we are the only group of people that sat down to the monopoly game with no money. So that's what has caused a lot of the difficulties and things of that nature. Like we laugh about growing up on government cheese sandwiches and fried bologna sandwiches and things of that nature. But it's like now, to find some success in a capitalistic society that enables us not to live in fear, right? Because it's like we know that we could survive off the bare minimum or damn near nothing if you have other people, you know what I'm saying, kind of riding for you.
Yeah,
Right.
community.
So I think now is a good time because I'm talking about realistically, if they, just call for a national emergency, suspend the Constitution, and quarantine everybody off, because that's one of the rumors floating around.
That's possible.
That we may be quarantined for 2 to 4 weeks in our homes. I think now is a good time for people to reach out to loved ones and friends that you haven't talked to in a while, just to check to see if they're okay. If you could send them a few dollars to help them go shop, do that. If you can go shopping for somebody elderly in your neighborhood, I think now is a good time for us to come together instead of just planting fear. It's like this is a great opportunity for us to come together as a people.
But isn't it also a time for us to truly put in what it means to have faith? Because faith is believing in something you can't see. So if all around us is scarcity, no toilet paper, the schools are shut down, no jobs, doesn't it force us to go within and believe?
It should.
And rely
I
on
think
something greater than everything outside of ourselves, including the government.
Well, first of all, we have seen, I mean, I don't want to make this a political conversation, but I think we've seen maybe the obtruse nation, the obtruse, like, I think we can expect that there's going to be some lag time between what the government officials and administration can provide versus what in real time people really need. You get what I'm saying? Like, bureaucracy is bureaucracy. So by the time Congress decides to pass X, right? Like today, for example, Congress denied emergency sick pay leave. So that might come back across the congressional floor, but by the time that's happened, people have already been served eviction notices. So I definitely think we're going to have to find creative ways to, again, kind of
Exactly.
exist in community, um, that in ways that we're not having to do right now. But a part of having faith, I think, is also recognizing where you stand, right? And I say this to say, like for example, the last couple of days I've been complaining about, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to teach online. This is not what I got paid to do, blah blah blah. And a friend of mine who's also a faculty member said, she, she basically reminded me, well, but you're
Exactly.
still getting paid, and there are tons of people who are gonna have to find a way to advocate for themselves to get paid for their hourly wages. So I also think part of faith is also recognizing what's in
Mm-hmm.
my hand, right? Like Moses, right? Like, before Moses goes to see Pharaoh, God is like, "What's in your hand?" And he's like, "It's just a staff." So I definitely think part of knowing faith is knowing what I already have in my hand, what I
Right.
already have in possession.
That staying
You know
in
what I'm saying?
that state of gratitude.
Yeah. And that was a check and balance for me, because I was like, "Ooh, girl, you need to stop talking," because you know what I'm saying. Like when she said that, I was like, "She's right. I'm still gonna get a paycheck, right? Like I'm not having to convince anyone that my pay needs to still come, you know." So when she said that, I was like, "Let me be quiet and just be thankful and recognize the privilege I have and go
Let
on
me
to the
ask you,
next
Kina,
thing."
what do you know about the coronavirus? What like do you have what has been your research and what it is, where it came from, and
So I went to CDC, and I've been visiting the Louisiana Department of Health website. Those have been my two sources: the Centers for Disease Control Prevention and Louisiana Department of Health. And so I know that there are various strains. The one that people are most concerned about right now is CV-19. I know that the two groups of individuals who are most likely to have a fatal experience with this disease would be those with autoimmune deficiencies and the elderly, right? So that automatically takes me off the proverbial chopping block. I don't know if that's like a
mm-hmm.
horrible term to use. So that was the first thing that I find out. Like, is this something that I personally um, will be directly impacted? And once I found out that that wasn't me, that did free me up to be able to think about it more like logically and
Mm-hmm.
logistically, you know? And so for me, even now, like when I think about who in theory should be walking around panicked, I can see, like I had a student in class today who said, I have a grandpa and I'm so concerned that I'm going to visit him and I'm going to do harm to him. And I told that student I appreciated them
Mm-hmm.
sharing. You get what I'm saying? So I think there are people who are not sure about how they could hurt people they love. So, I mean, but for the most part, I do think people are just kind of swarming around in the bottom pits of the internet, bottom
Mm-hmm.
pits of internet information, which is
Mm-hmm.
unfortunate.
Yeah. Um, what I have researched, so human coronavirus have been around for a long time. In humans, I want to say there's about 5 to 7 strands that we normally get. And it could be in, upper respiratory infections from the common cold, whatever. However, COVID-19, and this information is coming from something I was researching, epidemiologists, virologists, something like that. The COVID-19, that particular strain actually originated in bats. Bats, so to give you a comparison, humans get about 7 to 10 different strands. Bats can carry about 100 different strands. So where this originated from in China, Wuhan, and it's a wet market where a lot of animals are sold in a wet market. I mean, you'll have meat hanging up, you'll have different animals hanging up for purchase, raw, whatever. And so what this epidemiologist was saying was that the virus is typically found in the intestinal tract of bats, but no one knows how it came into humans. Now whether an animal came into contact with fecal matter of the bat and had the virus, and that particular animal was sold and whatever.
Somebody directly ate a bat.
Or that too. It's a wet market and it's in China. But and it affects the respiratory tract. So the biggest thing you do want to do is wash your hands, all the time, clean your surfaces, stuff like that. So it brings me also to another topic. This is why we shouldn't be eating animals we're not designed to eat. We should not be eating bats. We should not be eating crickets. We should not be eating armadillos. We should not be eating snakes. And we shouldn't be eating animals that we were not designed or created to eat. I know this is a whole nother podcast, but I'm just saying.
I know. But I feel like you went in the hole. You drove the car from Texas to Florida.
That's true, because the cow eats plant-based. And builds great muscle. The cow don't eat other animals.
So basically, you're saying that the cow gets fat, like they say the gorilla.
Well, they're saying, humans, we have to build muscle by eating lean protein, animal protein.
These animals are getting their protein.
But the animals are getting their protein from plants.
And when we eat the animals, we're only getting a fraction of the protein.
Yeah.
From the plants.
So if you're gonna eat some bat soup, out of China, I mean, sometimes.
I feel like at this point in the podcast, let's make it really clear, though, we're not saying that we blame China or Asian people for this epidemic, because people are also using this as a place to become very xenophobic right now. And so I just want to make sure we just make that really clear that we are not advocating for that type of ideology.
Just stating where they supposedly say the origin of it has come from. Even like with AIDS, where they talked about a green monkey bit somebody on their butt in Central Africa and all that stuff. So
and that just makes ways for, like I said, xenophobic and racist comments, and that also makes me really sad.
Yeah, we're in no way, shape, or form condone racism or anything like that, because we're big on taking away those layers. Take away your race, gender, your religion. Who are you? And we're all one.
We're shared humanity. And this is scary for everybody, right? Like, this is scary for people across the
I just think it makes you think we got to go back to the basics of knowing who we are and what we were designed and created to do and be in these bodies.
And things like this can be a major distraction, especially at a time when, it seems like a lot of people are starting to wake up consciously to the knowledge of themselves and their connection to the universe. Even to their religions, I think people are starting to delve deeper. I think this right here it's an opportunity, but I think it's more of an exception than the norm. I think the norm is for people to gravitate toward fear because it's easy. But
and nothing, we've not said this before, because I know we're definitely trying to usher in the spirit of compassion, shared humanity, and love. But it is very profitable to make everyone afraid too. You know what I'm saying? That is profitable for so many different industries You know what I'm saying? It is very profitable to keep people in a status of fear. Is profitable,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
unfortunately, we live in a society where it's a crime of omission for commission. So they keep people in the dark. But I think
Yeah.
it's to a certain extent, is people are somewhat lazy in this society. It's like they want to be spoon fed information, so therefore they sit on the couch and listen to CNN or Fox, and that's the gospel.
Yeah.
I think that we individually have to turn into researchers, like many scientists for the most part, and then listen to that information to become critical. You mentioned that earlier. I think there's a lot of critical thinking in
Yeah.
this society. I know
That's true.
that some of the best conversations I have are with foreigners who've been educated outside the United States, unfortunately. And it's only because they're normally more well read and they think a little bit more critical. I think here,
Yeah. U.S. citizens, we've been entertaining ourselves to death for eons at this point, right? We're
oh
amusing ourselves to death. You know, we want to consume everything that keeps us feeling great, and you know, the easy, the lazy, the lack of effort. And there's a book that I read years ago, and it was called "Amusing Ourselves to Death." I don't necessarily remember the author, but he talked about part of it was like the lack of the lack of information or quality information about our experiences on Earth are largely because we just want to be amused, because it makes it easier to deal with hard
That's
things
true.
or to ignore hard things.
That's so
We're
exactly.
true.
constantly
And the
amused.
thing is, it's like most people rather be entertained than educated. And I think that that's a big
Yes.
problem come Sunday.
Yes.
A lot of people, unfortunately, go to church to be entertained as opposed to educated, because most of them come Monday morning, if you ask them what the sermon was about, they probably couldn't tell you.
That's
Couldn't tell you.
Kina.
I agree. People are seeking a feeling, and they want to feel good, and that's
Yeah,
what they
and
want
it's
to do.
almost
They want
like
to
it
feel good.
serves as Novocaine for their pain. Like a lot of people now, with the fear, they'll use it almost like Novocaine to numb themselves, or they'll turn up.
Yeah, because they are scared. They're scared, but they don't want to unpeel what that fear means. And so, like, because again, I think it's hard to navigate
It's
the
true.
unknown, right?
But
That
we have,
it's hard. And instead of peeling back those real emotions, we'd rather
yeah,
cover them
we
up.
have to ask ourselves, why are we feeling or experiencing what we're experiencing? Because 9 times out of 10, like after all this passed, we'll look back at how we reacted to it and be like, why was I so afraid?
Exactly.
Because we've been here
That's a
before. We've
great
been
point.
here, Y2K. We've been here with a lot of other things, right? But it's, like I remember, what was the name of that movie with Will Smith and his son was in it? He made a comment where he said that fear is not real. He said danger is real, but fear is not real. It's an illusion. And I just think that we have to start shifting the way we look at things, because we have to get to the point where we don't even fear death. You know what I mean? Because
Definitely.
if we really
Yeah.
dig
Yeah.
deeper and understand that, like the spirit body is an energy body, and energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It just moves and changes shape and form. You always will be. That's
Yeah.
another story for another day, because in the ecumenical councils back in the day, they used to speak of reincarnation. It was taken out of the books. A lot of people don't want to hear that, but it was taken out of the books. And people just feel that, hey, we just have this one shot at this thing, and this is the end, and blah, blah. And it puts you in a fear
This is
state,
it.
because now you have this lack mentality, right? Instead of understanding that your spirit is infinite, it's an ongoing thing, right?
Yeah.
And when you reach that level, it's like fear dissipates. And there are a lot of people, I'm kind of getting off on a tangent I don't want to do, but there are a lot that are in these elite positions that run this country. These people know these things, right? And even some of your high-powered ministers and stuff know
it's consciousness. It's a level, and people have attained very high levels of consciousness, the top 1% to 5%, which is, if we all agree that energy cannot be destroyed, it can only be changed or transformed. This is why we are calling this shifting the atmosphere from fear to love. All this energy that we're putting into fear, let's put it into love.
Yeah, because
it could be put into something else.
Go.
Go
for it.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Well, no, because even talking about like, Janie knows I am a systems person. I tend to look at everything from like larger systems, from the macro, and the term I used yesterday was the performance of outrage, the performativity of outrage, and the performance of discomfort. Because going back to something Russell said earlier, I think there are groups of people, who, while this is a new take on a disease or an epidemic, there are groups of people who've been here before in some capacity. We talk about like in the early 80s when the AIDS epidemic first was created, and it was just going through the LGBT community, and there was no government support or whatever. If we're talking about kids who are hungry, there are communities of people who spend all summer trying to figure out how to feed their kids. And so in some ways, I wonder if there are certain groups of people who are looking at us and being like, well, why are y'all even like, up in airs? Because this is 75% of how my life goes anyway. You get what I'm saying? Like, I'm always concerned about health, or I'm always concerned about feeding my kids. And so a lot of this is making me think about who are people who are privileged enough that they don't regularly have to even think about safety, right? Like, there are certain groups of people who live in our society who live in the best neighborhoods, and they go to the best schools, and all their groceries come from Whole Foods. You know what I'm saying? And their lives are so situated that the slightest discomfort is like, oh my gosh. Because as a Black woman in America, I regularly feel unsafe for multiple reasons. You get what I'm saying? Like, feeling and I'm not saying that like mentally I live in that place, but I'm always aware, right, what racism is doing. I'm aware of what misogyny does. And so a lot of this is also me feeling like there are certain groups of people who live in safe bubbles, and we're seeing a lot of their reactions to being unsafe right now. And those are the people who are like buying up the Walmart. It's new to them. You get what I'm saying? Because Corona is not going to just stay in the lower third or Martin Luther King Boulevard. That's it's going to move its way up. And so I also think there's a certain amount of societal privilege working right now. And those are the people who regularly get to say, oh no, like, I don't have any concerns in life. And this is one of those things that makes it, this is equal opportunity. COVID-19 is going to be equal opportunity. And I think a lot of people don't know how to deal with that.
But I think we were at a great stopping point to wrap up. Any last minute comments you want to just kind of leave? If there was anything that you want people to know today, to do in shifting the atmosphere from fear to love, what is the one thing you would say?
Humans are incredibly resistant. We have been as a species for a very long time. And I think we should remember that. I do think that if people can front load their frontal lobe, cerebellum, I think that's what it's called. That
Mhm.
they can resist relying on their lizard brains, right? The more information they know, the better equipped they will be to respond to fear appropriately,
Mhm.
and to walk in courage, because courage is not the absence of fear, but it is moving even when fear is present.
That's right. That's a great point. What about you, Russell?
It's just reminding me of something I had said months back. It's almost like, when you have faith, it's like driving in the fog. It's like your GPS tells you that you're going from point A to point B, but as you're driving, you could only see what's immediately in front of you. And you just continue to go. And as you proceed forward, your vision comes a little bit clearer. You could see a little bit more, a little bit more. But the faith in knowing that you're headed in the right direction, ultimately you get there. But I think people just need to point their GPS, their God positioning system, really dig deep during this time to, practice your faith, whatever it is that you believe in, like whatever your spiritual or religious philosophy is, to actually practice it during this time, because that's needed. And not only praying for yourself, praying for others, reaching out to others, and seeing who we can assist during this time, and bless some people.
Yeah. Great points. And I think just, yeah, that oneness and being of service, and how can I serve? How can I help? How can I, keep everyone's vibrations above fear as well during this time? So this has been Matters of the Heart and Soul podcast. I'm your host, Janie Charlo, and co-hosting with Russell Bruce. And we have been talking with Ms. Kina Reed on shifting the atmosphere during the coronavirus scare and shifting it from fear to love. Stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks, Kina.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.